Well, welcome back to the channel. Tonight we're going to be finishing up the assembly on the Allis Chalmers WD main shaft in the transmission. I had the counter shaft and the sliding reverse gear on the part just before this, so we're going to be working on the main shaft. So if that's something that you're interested in, stick around because it's coming up. Alright, so our next step is installing the main shaft. We've got the lower shaft and everything in, and now we're ready for the main. So the installation on this one, instead of coming from the front side like what the counter shaft did, this one will come in from the rear end. So you can see our housing opening right there. We'll bring it in from the rear end, and as we bring that shaft forward, we're just going to start sliding the gears on just like we did before. So I've got my gear set laid out here. First things first, as always, I'm going to lube up the shaft and make sure that the gears are also lubed up, and then that will just ensure proper assembly and easy assembly once we get going. So one more peek inside here after we've got the counter shaft and the reverse sliding gear installed, and you can see why they have this larger spacer. Basically, when your shifting fork is attached to this gear and you're not in reverse, it's just going to be hanging out, you know, right there in the middle. So if you happen to get this smaller spacer up there, you're going to be touching gears and you're going to know something's wrong immediately. But anyway, it'll hang out right there, and then whenever you put it in reverse, then it's just going to be pulled and mate right up with this gear, and then it also mates up with the gear that's going to be up here on our main shaft, and that's what's actually going to be turning backwards out to your rear wheels. So I'll put that thing back in neutral for the reverse rather, and then we will get started on the assembly on the main shaft. All right, so we're going to slide the main shaft through and get it started here, and then we'll start sliding our gears on as we move forward. So back inside the housing, which you can't see, I've got a 4x4 block sitting in there, and that's just holding this shaft up so that I can slide it forward to me as I assemble this thing. So that's nice because that keeps that shaft from wanting to slide out. It's just going to hold it in place. So step one on the assembly, we're going to put the washer on here. We'll go ahead and slide it just a little bit further forward here, because we got two different size splines. We got the smaller and then the larger. That one's got to be on the larger spline. All right, so next will be a bushing for first and second, and then first gear. So here is our first gear, and our angle of the gear is going to be forward. And another thing to note too is the little nubs that's inside this bushing, they need to be facing forward on the shaft, and make sure they're in there, because that's going to keep that shaft or that bushing from just kind of spinning internally here. It's going to be spinning with the shaft as it's spinning, but we don't want it just floating. So make sure you got those. So I gotta be real careful that that bushing doesn't slide out on me. I'll get past my reverse gear that's in here, reverse sliding gear. There we go. So that's just going to mate up with our gear there in the bottom. All right, next we're going to have another collar, except this one's going to be a spline collar, and it's for your first and second gear, and it just fits right inside of your second and reverse sliding gear, which is the one in this hand right here that's got the edges on it. So I'm going to just slide this together as an assembly, and then it's going to be spinning basically anytime that shaft's moving. This gear is going to be spinning. So we're going to slide that on here as well. Alright, so now I can probably start sliding that shaft forward a little bit more. I'd like to go ahead and get it started here. Okay. So you can see the spline right there that we're wanting all this to mate up to is coming. So I've got that lined up. Alright, so we'll just slide that on to the splines. Okay, now our next set of gears to go on are going to be our second gear, and we've got another bushing. And that bushing also has the little nub in it that's going to be on the spline, so make sure that that's in place. Now, if you want to make sure it doesn't fall off, just hold that where it's down. Let gravity be your friend. And then it's also going to have the angles on the gear are going to be facing this direction, you know, the angle towards the front. So I'll slide that in here. And there's several more gears to come into play, so I'm going to have to back the shaft out just a smidgen. It's pretty tight in here, and we'll have to get everything lined up on the gears here in just a second. Alright, so we got that. Next, we're going to have a thrust washer. I'm just going to go right there. And then the next set of gears with a bushing. They call it a spline collar, but that bushing is going to be our third gear. And we got the angle the same as the others. And there's our bushing right there with the little nub in there. So that's going to be, it looks like that nub on this one's facing to the rear. So let me just double check that real quickly. Yeah, so it goes forward too. The schematic shows it in the back side of the bushing, so excuse me, but the actual description says forward. Alright, so I'm going to slide that dude on here. Okay, so that gear actually needed to be put on the other direction with the clutch jaws towards the front, like you can see here in this picture. So I actually put it on the wrong direction. So if you're using this portion of the video to assemble yours, make sure that you turn that gear around where the shifting jaws are towards the front of the tractor. Now I've got to make just a little bit more room for this last gear, and then we'll be able to slide this whole mechanism in. So the last couple of pieces that we have here are the splined collar for third and fourth gear, and then we have the splined coupler that's splined on the inside there, as you can see, and that is also for third and fourth. So we'll slide that over our shaft. I'm going to reach in here and push it forward a little bit so that we can get all that together. And that is going to make up all of the pieces on the main shaft. We're going to have the what I call the input shaft to go on here in just a second, but we're just going to start working that shaft up into place, and I'm feeling on the back side here, and we're almost to the point where the bearing is going to want to start in the housing. So this will be interesting because I've got to drive this thing in and have my gears you know, go as well and be on the splines. So let me just check this out back here. So it's already on the edge. Let me get the camera around there and I'll show you what it looks like on the back side, looking in the housing. There's my block I was telling you about. It's kind of been guiding that shaft. I'm going to leave it there, but the shaft is now to the point where it's starting. See right in there, it's just that big bearing that we replaced is started in the housing. So our next step is we're just going to put a driving pin right here, and I'm going to just start tapping that in. And as I do that, I'm going to have to just double check all of my gears as they start sliding. As that shaft starts sliding forward, we got to make sure that I've got everything lined up. I don't want to move anything around right at the moment because I'm just barely started. And I want to make sure that none of my gears below get caught up in that counter shaft either. So let me get my punch lined up and we're going to start driving this thing in. Now, it felt like it moved quite a bit there, and I don't believe that was because it was starting, but kind of lift up here, make sure everything is where it needs to be. All right, so I got it started there, and then it just kind of took off, which is great. So it slid in that housing, that bearing slid right up in there nice and easy. I didn't have to really do a whole lot of driving. It's still got something here that's not letting everything slide back. That's probably it. Yep, there it is. Okay, so can't quite see on the camera here, but the question is, how do I know that I'm where I need to be as far as forward goes? And the answer is, if you look down inside here to your housing, you've got that groove right in this shaft. That's for a snap ring. So everything is in place. My snap ring now can slide over and I can install it, and I want to do that first. We'll get it installed in that groove, and that's holding all of my gears and everything in place where they need to be. So everything is, you know, feels nice and free. I don't have any bonds of any kind. So I'm going to be able to go ahead and get this snap ring installed. All right, so we got our snap ring installed. Now we're going to slide around to the back, and we're going to go ahead and bolt up this retainer plate. I'm not quite sure what the technical term of it is. Don't have my book right in front of me at the moment, but it's going to hold that shaft and everything in place from backing out this direction. So we've got these cap bolts down here. We got 6 of them. So we'll go ahead and get those put in place here. I'm right-handed, so I'm working left right now, and it's kind of a challenge, but we'll make it. So if you note, these have holes in them. Once we have all this torqued down, we're going to be running some wire through there, and it'll just go around the entire outer edge in each of these, and that will prevent them from being able to back out if something would happen to come loose. Alright, so just get my drill in here. It's a 3/4 inch socket. It's tight in there. You torque them to 35 foot-pounds. So I've already got my torque wrench set up here. Okay, so we got everything torqued at 35 foot-pounds. Now I'm just going to come in here with my wire, and we'll just feed it through there, hopefully easily. Kind of hard to see holes here, but I think there's one in every flat part. Okay, so I got the wire fed through, and that locks all of my bolts in. So now that that's completed, we can slide back over to the front, and we're going to be installing, they just call it in the book the spline clutch shaft. So we're going to take that and we're going to slide it right in to the front of our transmission. Inside the clutch shaft is a needle bearing that you can see. Here's my old one, and it had a place, and I think you can probably see that where it's been hit or something. The rollers still roll fairly decent, but I'm at this point and the bearing was fairly cheap, so I got a new bearing, and that's going to be part number 702-11-537. So we'll go ahead and get that out. And there's two different ways you can do it. You can either put it inside your shaft, or you can go ahead and put it on the shaft where all this is going to be assembled right here. So I'm just going to go ahead and just slide it on there like so, and then we're going to take our shaft and we'll just slide it over that needle bearing, and we'll have to get my gearing that's in here. Let me get you a better angle here. All right, so the gear on this shaft will have to fit in with the drive gear down on the bottom. All right, so the reason that I stopped there for just a second is I realized that I had this gear in backwards. So the shift area right here that the collar engages on was actually in between these two gears. It was flipped around. So I just ripped this back apart and got that straightened up where it needs to go. So now I can go ahead and I'll continue with my input shaft install. So I'm just going to ease it in. I'm going to take my punch and my hammer. So I'll tap in, make sure everything's good and free still. Yep. And again, you heard the distinct difference. So it is now pushed all the way back as far as it needs to go. Now my front shift collar can engage here, which engages the main shaft. So if you remember, we had some that were splined collars, like this one right here. It's splined on the inside, so it's hooked to that main shaft. So when this shift collar is forward, we're going to take our power straight through from the engine and just turn this gear however we have it oriented at that point. So everything looks to be fine as far as shifting goes. All right, so that will conclude the video of the transmission installation with both the counter shaft and the main shaft. Hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you've learned something. I certainly have. Please hit like, subscribe, share this video, and stick around because there's lots more coming up on this Allis Chalmers WD project. Stay tuned.